welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This week was a bit of a different episode as we had a guest on, Cory Jacobson. Now, some of you may be really familiar with Cory's work with elk hunting and hunting public land and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and all of these things synonymous with elk. And we do cover a little bit of that, but what I was really interested in covering was getting his experience as he recorded Destination Elk last year. There was a very unique caveat to the participants that were doing Destination Elk, and that was 8 days of elk hunting in the mountains with no food. So I wanted to get a bit more information from him on the background behind the idea, what the experience was, the different rules that were involved. And as you will hear, we talk about much else beyond that. It was a great conversation with a variety of topics that I think and hope will be helpful to you as you start to think about your time out in the mountains this fall. And we cover a variety of different episodes or a variety of different topics in there. Anything that we reference as far as some of the Elk 101 information or resources or the Destination Elk video series that we talk about is all linked in the show notes. So if you are interested in looking at those, you can go check those out and they will be available to you. So here is Cory and I covering hunting elk for 8 days with nothing to eat. Well, you don't eat, I don't think you need much of an introduction for the folks that listen to us, but we have had a lot of people that are into the mountaineering side of thing and the ultra running side of thing and just really anything to do with trails and mountains that have started listening to us. So if you don't mind just kind of giving a brief introduction of who you are and what you love, and then we can kind of get into the bulk of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Cory Jacobson, about, 16, 17 years ago, I started a little company called Elk 101, and it's allowed me to share my passion and my love for elk hunting with others. And, it's definitely morphed through the years, but at the end of the day, I love elk. I love the outdoors, and I love sharing that passion with others in a way that hopefully will inspire them to help us protect it so that our children and grandchildren have elk and wild places to chase elk.
I love that. And I've been exposed to some of your resources. And so I'd love to talk about Elk 101 just to let people who maybe don't know about it. But I have a very specific agenda.
Yes,
I-
right.
and I don't want to. I don't want to pull you from that because in full candor, this is very selfish of me. But if you remind me, we'll come back and visit that. So as a part of Elk 101, just to lay the foundation for maybe people who don't know, a number of years ago, you guys developed this series called Destination Elk, right? And
Yeah.
how many years ago was the first one?
We just finished our 7th season, so we're going into season 8 this year.
Okay, so going into season 8, I specifically want to talk about last season because there was something very unique about last season that differed from all the 6 prior to that. But for people who maybe aren't familiar with Destination Elk, never watched it, can you give kind of a 30-foot overview of what it even is as a whole?
Yeah. So Elk 101 is I would say at the center of it, it's a educational platform, is to teach people about how to increase their success as an elk hunter. Destination Elk is kind of our entertainment arm of that platform, obviously incorporating education in everything we do, but it's really just a camera guy following Donnie, which is my hunting partner, and myself around for the entire month of September as we chase elk, primarily in Idaho on public land. We'll venture out every once in a while and go to Oregon or Montana or Wyoming or even Alaska. But Destination Elk is just our video series that follows us along as we chase elk.
And I'll link the YouTube, link into the show notes so that people are interested. They can go check those out. They're all great. Even if you don't hunt elk, I think they're just an awesome series of adventure that'll get you excited to be in the mountains if you're not or you can't go. A question that I really wanted to focus on is 2024 Destination Elk was completely different than the others. Can you I have really 2 questions to start with that. 1, can you kind of lay what was different? And 2, I would really love to hear about that drive going down the highway where you had this brainchild of an idea that you thought would be good. And I guess question 2.5 of that is how do you have any friends left?
Yeah. So, um, we started with just Donnie and I. So it was just, one camera guy following just Donnie and I. And then we thought, well, let's make it bigger. Let's incorporate some of our friends in it. And so we created teams, and there's no competition. Like it's not a competition. It's just a group of two guys, two hunters, and one camera guy constitutes a team. And we did that. And yeah, I think that was in season four, maybe 4 or 5 when we started that. And people are like, yeah, it's cool to see different perspectives, different hunting styles, different personalities. And, there's some people that viewers don't necessarily connect with. And then others are like, I would share a camp with them. And so it was fun to bring all of that in and do kind of a collaboration with a bunch of different people. I love the TV series Alone, and it's on the History Channel. And it's where they take, 10 people, they put them out, they're by themselves, they have to self-film everything, but they can only take like 10 items with them, a sleeping bag, some fishing hooks, and they have to live. And the person who survives the longest and doesn't tap out is the winner. And I thought, how cool would it be to incorporate our team concept of elk hunting and kind of tie it in with that same theme of Alone of you have a certain, here's your gear list and it's very limited. And the primary part of the limitation is there's no food included on it. So for 8 days, you go out and you live off the land while you're hunting elk, and you can't take food with you. Whatever you can find that's legal to hunt or to forage, you can do that and see how we do. And for me, it was selfish because I've always wanted to do that, but I thought I couldn't do it for 30 days. There's no way I could live for 30 days without food. But I could go 8 days. Nobody's going to die in 8 days, even if they don't eat the whole time. And so that was kind of where the thought came from. I mentioned it to our camera guy, John, and his first reaction was, heck no, I'm not doing that. Because initially I wanted to have both hunters and the camera guy go without food. And I thought if the hunters have to provide food for the camera guy too, it's truly a team thing here. And John, he's like, I'm not interested. If you're going to do that, I'm not filming this year. I'm like, man, you've been filming with us for 10 years and you're going to literally walk away from an idea like that. And then he said, it takes a lot of energy to film and to document these things and to capture everything. And if I'm in a tent starving on day 7, the last thing I'm going to want to do is get up, pick up the camera, turn it on, walk over and start asking you questions about how you're feeling and how you're doing. And I thought, it's got a point. So we changed it, let the camera guys bring food, and the hunters weren't able to.
So you made a good point about what John said that I want to revisit in a later question, but I'm curious what the response was from the other teams who were hunting and were sort of having to abide by this, or I would guess maybe not participate. What was their reaction at first when you brought this up?
You know, to my amazement, almost everybody was excited about it. And I thought, we're going to struggle to find, and there were a couple of groups that said, I can't do that. I won't be a good addition to your group. So they passed on it. But for the most part, everyone was super excited, gung ho. Yes, we can do that. And I made sure they knew, hey, elk hunting is something we live for every fall, and I'm going to make it miserable potentially for you. So coming into this, you have to know it might not be that much of a fun elk hunt this year. And they're like, totally understand, totally get it, and we're on board. So from there, I thought, okay, it's on you. If you have a miserable experience and you don't get to see any elk and you wasted 8 days in September, I warned you.
And you can kind of like if you watch the series, one of the things that was most interesting to me because I had seen it and then I wanted to review it again prior to this in preparation for it. And the thing I noticed most recently was you can kind of see as it unfolds that demeanor changes really fast.
Yeah.
You start getting, no food and trying to do really much of anything. And just as the days carry on, it really gets hard. What so, other than the general overview of, okay, no food, and you kind of alluded to this about catching a bull trout prior to jumping on here. What were the rules? What other rules came with that? What stipulations were a part of that?
Yeah, so we provided each team, everybody got to bring their own camo, their own backpack, their own weapon, it was archery season. But in addition to that, we provided every team with a slingshot, with a roll of fishing line, and I forget how many hooks, but a couple hooks and a couple lures. And that was about it. We did provide each team with one cheat meal. So we had a peak refuel meal that each team got to, or each individual got to pick. And part of my, reasoning for wanting to do that was to see when people caved, to see after day one, if like I'm eating this, or it's like I'm saving this till the very end, so I have enough energy on day 8 to go. And so we did that, realizing one meal is not going to get you very far, but it's going to be cool to see how people utilize that meal and to see if it gives them a bump in energy, a bump in attitude, and also just having that there to see how much of a carrot that was dangled out in front of them. So we did provide that, and then unbeknownst to each team, when they shot an elk and packed it back to the truck and then brought it back to the base camp to hang it in the refrigerated cooler, they got a surprise meal because I thought, at packing out an elk, most teams were 2 to 3,000 vertical from the truck. So it was going to take an effort to get that elk out. And I thought we need to at least replenish a portion of what they've expended to do that. So nobody knew that. And then once they killed an elk, came back to base camp, they were rewarded with one more meal.
As I watched you sort of lay out these rules and tell them that they got if I remember right, they got a bar from Mountain Knots, right? A peak
Yeah.
refuel. I thought, man, this almost seems cruel. Like this almost seems intentional to dangle the carrot and see when they cave. Because you're right, you get a couple days in and you know that's in there, you naturally are gonna want to do it. I'm sure that this varies for every single person that was there. And I have a funny story. You may not even know about all of this to share as a part of this, but did you have any kind of a strategy going into it? You personally, you and I think you and Donnie were on a team. Did you two go into this with any sort of a strategy as far as, I mean, I could think of a number of different things if I were on a team how to play it. So I don't necessarily want to lead with that. I'll just leave the question there.
I think it goes back to the Mike Tyson quote of everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. And yeah, we had a plan. I didn't realize, and we can get more into that. I didn't realize how limited physically I was going to be. I thought I can go 3 or 4 days without food and, tackle the mountain just the same as I normally would. And so my plan was I'm going to save my meal until the halfway point. Obviously, my plan was to kill an elk on day one and have food to eat. But, and knowing that may or may not happen, my plan was hike as hard as I can, expend as much energy as I can. On day 4, eat my peak refuel meal, which, they're 1,000 calories, I think, 800 to 1,000 calories, pretty good mix of carbs and protein and fats. And then, the Mountain Ops bar was kind of a wild card, and it was, what are they, 120 or 160 calories. So it's not like it's going to carry you through, but it's almost just a treat, an energy treat. So my plan, for that was I'll eat it when I need it, like when I need that little boost of motivation. But and Donnie and I talked, well, let's get these meals and we'll split it. We'll each eat half when we need to, and that way we'll have another half a little bit later. But most of our planning went out the window after day 1.
It's one of the things I thought of. I thought, well, if I'm on a team, I wonder if it's a case where, because did each person as a part of that team have a tag?
Yeah. So each hunter. So there were 4 teams, 2 hunters and 1 camera guy on each team, and each team, both of the hunters each had a tag.
Now, this is easier, way easier said than done, but I thought, well, if you got two guys with a tag, you target any legal elk, get it down, live on that, and then let the other guy focus on age class if that's what he's interested in, or, whatever the stipulations were. But again, it's not like it's a farm and there's just you just walk up and pick which one you want, and then you've got a freezer full of meat. So, yeah, like you said, the Mike Tyson quote I love because that's so true in so many different situations when it comes to a lot of this. Even when you can take food, it's like you can have a great plan, but that could very well go out the window with any variable, be it weather or a fire or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Then, we could fish. So we made sure each team was put in an area where there was either a lake or, creek, stream, something where there was at least a potential to catch fish. Each team was given a slingshot. So squirrels, grouse, rabbits, plus every team had a small game head in their quiver so they could shoot their bow and, kill grouse or squirrels or rabbits. I thought we're going to be able to provide food. Like, you know how it is when you're out hunting, you're always you see a couple of grouse a day. There's squirrels everywhere. Every time you stop, you hear a squirrel chattering. So I thought we're going to have food. This isn't going to be a big deal. Yeah, maybe we're a little limited on the calories, but as long as we have food, we're going to be able to keep going. And I was shocked at how untrue that statement was.
So were you not seeing stuff, not catching stuff, or was it difficult to shoot squirrels? Did you have the energy to pull back your bow or
Yeah. So from day one, we took off from the truck and full of energy. It's like, this is going to be awesome. I know where we're going. We're going to set up camp. We're going to leave from camp. We're going to hear bugles. And we got camp set and took off hiking, and there were no bugles. There was no sign. All this area that I just knew was going to have elk in it ended up being kind of summer range. And we were hunting the third week of September. The bulls had left. They had moved down looking for the cows, and we didn't realize that. So right there, punched in the mouth, plan goes out the window. We aren't hunting elk here because there aren't elk here. Second thing, when you are not hunting squirrels, there's a squirrel in every tree when you're hunting. Like every time you stop, there's a squirrel chattering above you. The woods were absolutely silent. Like we couldn't, we would stop and listen for squirrels, and we couldn't hear a squirrel to go and chase. I did shoot a rabbit on the first night, and I thought, all right, we got dinner tonight and everything's good. And then, hiking in, we had seen fish in the creek. And so I thought, got fish for breakfast. So we're set here. This is exactly, everything's good other than the elk hunting. The elk hunting, and that's elk hunting on public land. That's just sometimes you're in them and sometimes you aren't. So everything was still good. And then we got back, and so we're 8 hours removed from our previous meal and hiking. We went in, I don't know, 2.5 miles, something like that, and gained 800 or 1,000 feet. So it wasn't a terrible hike in there, but we had camp on our back. By the time we got back to camp with that rabbit, I was famished. Like I needed fuel. And we had to split a rabbit between Donnie and I, and we boiled it. And then we drank the fluid that was left from boiling the bones of this rabbit. And it welched the hunger pains a little bit, but I could tell this isn't going to go very far. And the next morning went over to the creek and couldn't catch any fish, didn't see any fish up high, but we knew there were some down low. And with not hearing any bugles or seeing any elk, we decided to relocate, head back to the trailhead and go to a different area. And when we got down there, there's all these fish in this hole, and it took a little bit to catch them. Again, we don't have a fishing pole or anything. We just have some line, and I think I was using a rooster tail or maybe a fly at that time, and ended up catching a fish. And what we thought was going to be a brook trout turned out to be a bull trout. And you can't keep or eat bull trout. So here we are with a creek full of fish, getting hungry, and we can't eat these fish. So I ended up catching 4 bull trout and realized there's nothing else in here. These are all bull trout. There's no brook trout. There's no rainbows. There's not anything we can eat here. So that was pretty, mentally deflating. And we're 24 hours into this. We're in the morning of day 2, and already mentally it's like, okay, this is tough. I don't know if I can keep hiking like this. We're running out of energy, and We ended up killing a squirrel that day. Donnie and I shared a squirrel. And so we're 36 hours into it, and I've had half rabbit and half a squirrel, and I can't go. Like there is no gas in the tank. And I didn't realize how quickly your body went into maintenance mode, into protection mode, into if you aren't giving me calories, I'm not outputting any energy.
Um, what I think is most interesting is like you hear a situation like that where you climb 800 to 1,000 feet and what you're looking for is not there. And in most cases where you've got a pack full of food, it's not that big of a deal. You've kind of wasted half a day, but nothing huge. When you're in a situation like this, and I love that you mentioned the show Alone because Alone captures it really well. You are constantly thinking about efficiency. Like every step is costing you something in your reserves. And so any amount of feet, any step that is wasted is lower efficiency and that starts to sort of weigh on you mentally. And you've mentioned mentally a couple of times and you even whenever you were talking about John and proposing this idea to John, you said, I don't know. His comment to you was, I don't know on day 7 that I'm going to have what it takes to think up these creative questions to ask you in the interview. What did you start to notice? I mean, I think everyone would kind of expect to physically see this decline. That was one thing that I was curious about is like as the days start to roll on, one of the first thing that's going to lack in fuel is your brain and how that affected you all mentally.
Yeah. So, motivation, I think, and I don't know a whole lot about the physiology of it, but I think your body obviously functions on energy. And when you're on a normal diet eating carbs, carbs are what provide your energy. And without that, it doesn't take very long for your body to recognize, hey, we're depleted on what we need here, so we're not going to provide energy to be able to do what you're wanting to do. And your mind, you can overcome a lot mentally. You can say, I'm just going to do this. And, you talk about mental strength. When you don't have fuel going to your brain, you don't have mental strength. It's the same as another muscle. If you don't have fuel going to it, you're weak. And your brain absolutely, like you said, it's the first thing really. So by the middle of day 2, so 24 hours into it, I'm already pessimistic. And I keep a pretty good optimistic front, at least. In my mind, I might be thinking this is not going to work out, but outwardly, I'm going to be like, we're going to keep trying here. We're going forward. And 24 hours in, my mind is saying, this isn't going to work out. You're not going to be able to climb to the top of that mountain and find an elk. Just that's not going to happen. You're going to have to change your strategy here. I think I kept it together pretty good as far as you get hangry, and you're hungry, you're 24 hours in without food, you start snapping at each other. And obviously Donnie's so laid back and chill that we don't usually snap at each other too much. So I think we kept that together pretty good, but just the motivation side of it, the mental motivation to say, yeah, it's tough, but we're going to push on. The mind saying, yeah, it's tough and you're not going to push on. There's no energy here mentally either.
Yeah, I think you nailed the physiology for a guy who says he doesn't know much about it. That's pretty much how it works. And one of the things that I love about you talking about that and highlighting it is what we find, even in people that we've worked with, is this tends to happen leading into their expedition or their hunt or whatever because they notice it in training. A great rule of thumb is look, practice some of this stuff when you're in training for some of it so you know how it's going to sit with you or whether you like it when the real deal comes. And you'll get there's sort of been this push lately about like, well, I don't, need to focus on nutrition. I'll just kind of grab something at the local mountain gas station and I'll be good to go. And that might be true for a day. I mean, an afternoon hunt or a day hunt or whatever. But when you start to get into these 3, 5, 7, 10-day hunts, if you're not fueling really well, you will start to notice that. And everyone sort of expects that to mean, and it does to some degree physically. But what I've seen be the most true is it affects you mentally and the way that it presents itself. Even when you have food, it's just not enough. The way that it presents itself is you start making really silly mistakes. You don't want to go the long way around. You just kind of cut across, the open sage instead of going up and around and trying to drop in. or you're not as quiet trying to tiptoe over logs, or you're just jumping from log to log because you just don't have that little bit extra to give. And you might as well count it out if you hear something in the bottom of a hole and going after it, on the last day.
Totally.
So that fueling piece, of course, it makes sense where a guy's not getting much to eat, but it even makes sense or nothing to eat. It even makes sense where a person could be potentially low on fuel, and you highlighted it so well that the first thing that it starts to really affect is starts to affect the mental side of things. Did you guys have any sort of a I'll give you a story, and then this is the question. Did you and Donnie specifically, because this was probably who you knew the most about is yourself and him, have any sort of a strategy in the days of the weeks leading into the hunt as a preparation and thinking, "We're not gonna be getting any food." Here's my story, and then I'll let you answer. 2 of the guys, well, 3 of the guys in the group, so I first heard about this last June. I think it was at the EXO golf tournament. Corey Ford was in town, who's on the Angry Spike team. And then I get a phone call from another couple of guys who are like, what should we do ahead of time, to sort of prep with this? And you had kind of two schools of thought, right? You had one, which was glutton yourself to death in preparation and fill the stores. And the other was start to restrict yourself to allow the body to adapt to a lower level of energy prior to getting exposed to it, right? So it's like, okay, well, if you expose yourself to that, be ahead of time, you'll still have the consequences, but the margin between your norm and this will be less because you've already experienced it. Did you guys have any conversation about that going into it, or was it just like we're going to show up and do what we need to do?
Yeah, I really thought 8 days I can do anything for 8 days. We don't need to do any extra preparation. We don't need to bulk up. We don't need to, you know, we can just show up and we'll make it work. We'll kill an elk within 3 days. We always do, and so we didn't have a lot of discussion, a lot of planning. It was just like, yeah, we're tough enough. We'll make it work. And that was wrong. Um, hindsight's always 2020, but bulking up, fueling up, glutton, eating, building the reserves, that would have been wrong. Um, Limiting calories to a degree, that probably wouldn't have worked really well either. So, um, I'm about 2 months into carnivore diet right now. And had I known what I know now, and I've done keto before and things, but had I known what I know now, I would have done carnivore for 2 months leading up to the hunt and gone into ketogenesis and not relied on carbs, because that was the thing that was most surprising to me. Even when we did have as much meat as we wanted sitting there, we didn't have hunger pains because of that, but we also didn't have any energy. Like we were still, our body was looking for carbs for energy. And when there's zero carbs, there's zero energy until you go into ketogenesis where your body's burning fat for energy. That doesn't happen in 5 days. And nothing we could have done to prepare other than being prepared for a high protein, low fat, no carb diet would have really been effective, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean that's the other part of this too is, you know, elk is really, really lean. And so even when you go into that, I think your quote with Mike Tyson's perfect because there is no way to prep for it except for to kill your two elk and get out of there. you know, because elk is so lean that there's no dietary fat intake coming in, so you're gonna burn stored body fat, but the line in the sand there, and someone made this quote in the introduction of each video, John, when he put it together. I think it must have been in each video. They said, "I feel okay. I just don't have the gas to go uphill." So the intensity that you're placing on the demand of the muscle is going to determine the substrate or the fuel that's being used. And the turnover rate between carbs versus fat versus dietary fat and even stored body fat is different. And so you highlight it perfect and you say it perfect in saying, we felt all right. Like we didn't have this gnawing hunger, but the juice in the tank just wasn't there as the intensity started to increase. Did you, as did you want to say something? Sorry.
No, I just, and that was the big thing to me is energy, motivation, that was number one. But even when it was like, okay, I'm going to force myself to go here, you'd take 10 steps uphill and your muscles just weren't oxygenating. They weren't efficient. They weren't effective. They were like, we are in no go mode here. We are in
Yeah.
full maintenance mode, which watching alone now, all they do is sit in their tent. Like
Yeah.
they are not hiking up a single hill. It's energy for them to walk to the water source and fill their water and bring it back and boil it in camp. And then they lay in the tent the rest of the day. That's a big difference between that and hiking 3,000 vertical looking for an elk to bugle.
Yeah.
And I could have sat in a tent for 8 days and been just fine. But throw in hiking and looking for an elk and just the frustrations and the demand mentally that is anyway, without fuel to help you mentally or physically, it was, there was definitely I went from 24 hours in, I'm 100% pessimistic. This isn't going to work. We're not going to be able to do this. And then by about day 3, it was like, you know what, this sucks. But elk hunting is supposed to suck. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be a challenge. Let's just embrace it and make something happen. If we just go every day to the best of our ability, sooner or later something's going to happen. And there was definitely a shift in mindset there that took place. And it's something that 24 hours in, I'm thinking this whole 8 days is going to be terrible. I'm not going to learn anything. I've just wasted a hunt. I've wasted all these other people's time. And then it turned into, this is awesome. This is a grind. I'm going to grind right now and we're going to make something work.
Yeah, the physiology of the human body is phenomenal. And even when I was in school and like first started to learn about it, I mean, I was just infatuated with it. And this that statement is relevant to this to say that we have so many different conversion mechanisms in us to make sure we stay alive that you almost can't mess it up. And so as you start to flow through that first 24 hours, most of your carb stores get exhausted and you do start to switch into burning muscle partially. So there are parts of muscle that can be converted into glucose for the brain. There are parts of breaking down fat that turn into glucose and can start fueling the brain. And what a person can notice there is like 24 hours, it's exhausted, you're smoked, and that's all you feel. But once you start to get to the 42, 72-hour mark, that conversions mostly happen and you start to get a little fuel because the body's recognizing it and the optimism can start to creep back in. So it's so awesome to me to hear you convey verbally what you felt in what I know happens physiology, and it's just it's cool. It's a cool experience.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I'll add to that, just knowing now, and I knew a little bit then, but having experienced carnivore and what your body goes through and how it gets its fuel and that transition and everything, it was amazing. I'm obviously still burning carbs for energy on day 3 or 4, whatever it was. The only time I felt like I'm going to be okay, like, boy, I feel normal again. I ate 4 shaggy mane mushrooms, and they were really the only thing I ate during that 8 days that had any carbs in it. And, them having just even a little bit of carbs made a huge difference.
yeah.
And, when your body's relying on carbs, it needs carbs. And it's amazing how little it takes to make you feel a lot.
Could you imagine if you had stumbled on like a late huckleberry patch still just turning? That'd have been, oh
And
man,
I
that'd
was
have been like,
hoping. I was hoping.
I know it. That'd have been like apple crisp at Christmas, just finding that thing in the middle of that.
Well, what's
Oh,
funny is when we were hiking yesterday, I did stumble into such a huckleberry patch. I mean, loaded giant huckleberries, and I'm doing carnivore. And so I had to pick them and give them to my son. And I can't eat huckleberries now. So it's like, oh, this is my
you
whole
stuff
life.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I am curious going into this as the guy at the head of the helm of this. Did you have any concerns about anybody? Not whether or not they would make it. I mean, the group that you had on there are all pretty experienced outdoorsmen, pretty experienced elk hunters. It's not like they're lost or worried in the woods at all. But just from a a physical or a physiology standpoint, dehydrating, anything like that that you had to worry about from a health standpoint?
Donnie is my hunting partner, and if Donnie makes it through September without some kind of a health issue or injury, it's pretty miraculous. So yeah, I always concerned about Donnie just because Donnie mentally will force himself to do things that might not be good for him physically. And he's done it time and time again. And that's a compliment to him and his mental toughness and his optimism and his willingness to just say, "Yep, let's do it." And so yeah, I in the back of my mind, I'm thinking Donnie's going to starve himself to death to the point where he's not gonna, he's going to be doing damage. And then we are 3 months before we leave to go hunting, and Donnie has his gallbladder removed. Has a little bit of a health issue, has to have his gallbladder removed, and then a month before we head out, I end up with a hernia and have to have hernia surgery and have a hernia repaired. And so we're both, a little bit impaired to begin with, but I think day three, Donnie he was throwing up. He was not doing good. Like looking at him, he was gray, and it's just like, okay, there's something more than just being hungry 3 days in going on. So we forced Donnie to start eating, and even he knew it was for the best, but he would only eat. I bet he wasn't getting 400, maybe 500 calories a day. Just he still wanted to participate, but knew that he wouldn't. But it was amazing. He just ate. I don't remember what all he had, a Mountain Ops bar and a couple other things that were pretty good carb load. And he just got color back in, he got energy, and it didn't take a whole lot of calories. And so he still limited himself quite a bit, but he did need some intervention there.
When you were first kind of talking about destination elk and you talked about the states that you hunted in and you mentioned Alaska, as the first thing I thought of was, he's just just looked like a bad way. And I've hunted up there and I've thought, man, that would be, I can't think of a worse situation than to be that far back. And Alaska's different. Like, you're not coming out. You gotta figure it out. And that episode that's an episode that's worth watching for sure for people who haven't seen your series.
Yeah, and I mean, to talk briefly on that, Donnie had COVID. This was 2020 or 2021, so right in the heart of COVID. And I mean, it is what it is, but you couldn't fly for 14 days after COVID. We left on day 14. So Donnie was able to go, but he was 14 days out. Still pretty sick, as far as just lack of energy and everything. Well, then we get up there. I shoot my elk on day one, spending the night on the mountain with no food, shivering. We did, a very dumb thing, but I didn't even take a jacket with me. It was bluebird skies, which in Alaska, you should know if you have a bluebird sky, you better be prepared because it's going to change. And it did. I just had on pants, base layer shirt, and a vest, and we ended up staying the night on the mountain 8 miles from camp. And it started downpouring, and it rained 12 inches of rain over the next 5 days. Hiking back to camp, everything's wet. Donnie tweaked his knee. And we get back to camp, and he's like, "I'm getting a fever. Something's wrong." And John and I are like, "We have to go pack this elk out." So we left him for 3 days. It took us to pack the elk. We left Donnie in his tent and had an in reach. So we're able to message him and be like, "Hey, are you still alive?" And I mean, literally for the first day and a half, it was just barely. And, listening to it from Donnie's standpoint, he's literally standing there or laying in his tent with the inReach in his hand with his thumb on the SOS button, thinking I've got to push it. And when we got out of there, they basically said we couldn't have flown. Your only option would have been the Coast Guard showing up with a helicopter and lowering a cable to lift you out of there. That's, and you don't think about things like that. But here, you've always got an out, it seems like. And there it's, the consequences are a lot more drastic.
Yeah, I think watching that, anybody who's been in a pretty remote place had to feel for him. And if you're like my wife and I, when the new season of Alone releases, you burn through it. So after you burn through the newest, you should go watch this because it's like Alone, watching you guys trying to figure out how to help him get this bull out. And if I remember right, like there's some points where he's in the tent in a sleeping bag, just shivering cold, and yeah, you could you could sense in even watching it, it wasn't good. I mean, that was 5 years ago, and you're still watching. You're like, man, I hope he gets out.
Totally. Yeah. But, and turns out he had kidney stones and passed 3 kidney stones on the last day that we were there. So he's laying in the tent. If anybody, I've not experienced it. I don't ever want to. Because I mean, it just can't be pleasant. And the experiences I've seen people go through are not good. But here he is in a remote tent after having been sick for 2 weeks, tweaked his knee. So, I mean, all these things really creep into your mind and decrease your mental strength. And then you're laying there, vomiting, diarrhea, a fever of 102, 103, pain that you can't explain. And you're by yourself for 3 days laying in this tent while your buddies are out there breaking their back trying to get this elk off the mountain. Mentally, it's not a good place to be.
No. I don't want to spoil the outcome of this last season, so we'll make people watch kind of what happened. But what overall, and I'm sure you've gotten some reports from the other folks that were on the trip too. What were some of, in your mind, some of the big takeaways, lessons, things that kept getting repeated afterwards that everyone was saying?
I think, from the participant standpoint, there were teams that cracked early, that cheated, that actually went back and got food and took food with them. There were other teams that I thought might have been the ones that would cheat that went the entire 8 days with almost no food and kept going. So, I mean, I think you learn a lot about character is not the right word because you're put in a situation there that is abnormal and not realistic. So, I don't think that defines anybody's character, but I think it definitely shows who's willing to do something about the situation they're in and who's willing to stick it out and suffer through it. Um, I think from a viewership standpoint, there were some people who absolutely loved the drama of everything, of seeing us suffer, of seeing, a little bit of extracurricular hunting. I have never in my life focused on a shot like I did during those 8 days. Every shot, whether it was a squirrel, a rabbit, a grouse, I have never held a pin on the spot for so long and said, this has to hit its mark. I have to have this grouse. I am starving right now. And you'd think you'd get desperate and just start flinging arrows at stuff. It's the opposite. Like you go into hyper focus of this is my one and only shot to make something happen. So that was kind of cool to see how I would react, in a situation that wasn't life or death, but that was pretty important, and to see that kind of focus. But then there were other people who, as viewers, said, "This is boring. I'm just sitting here watching you guys complain about being hungry, and you aren't even getting into elk because you can't hike. This is dumb. Don't ever do it again." And for those people, um, we won't ever do it again. That's, I have no desire to ever do that again. You couldn't pay me to do that again.
And I think that, I mean, that leads to kind of an interesting question because, this is such a large part of your platform and most of it is education. I hate terms like this, but I'll throw it out there because I think you probably hate terms like this too. But as a content creator, how much do you lean towards this is what we're interested in. This is what we think would be fun. We're going to record what we would do anyway, and then we're going to put it out there for people to consume, and what's made of it is what's made of it, versus bending more towards here's what people say they want, even if it's not necessarily the way we might do it. We're going to bend towards that because it's what our audience wants.
Yeah. I think, for me, it's a blending of both of those things. And it is the way that I hunt and the way that I want to portray the hunt is how I think 90% of hunters want to hunt and how they portray it. We don't, if I wanted likes and I wanted views, I would be hunting private ranches and I would be killing an elk every day. That's, I mean, that's the reality of it. That's what the majority of YouTube You throw a successful hunt with a 400-inch bull screaming in your face and you shoot it and he dies, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of views because that is just the algorithm. For us, we go 8 days of hunting and we show 7 days of not killing something. So every day is a different episode for us. And you're going to have an episode where we don't even hear an elk bugle. So we've got to create some other kind of content in that day. And there's usually enough that happens that it's like, yeah, that was kind of cool. There's educational, components and pieces there. Um, but we're limiting ourselves on the number of people that are going to watch it and
Yeah.
the number of views we're going to get. So I don't create content to try to bump up views. I create content to portray the reality of what an elk hunt is like for a public land over the counter type elk hunter, which I think 90 or 95% of us are. And that's my background. And I've had opportunities and offers to go and hunt, high dollar private ranches, but at the end of the day, that's not what I want. That's not who I am. Yeah, we all dream about that. There's been a couple times I'm like, I'm really, struggling with that decision to not go and do that. But I don't want to change what built us. I don't want to change what built me. And I want to portray it the way that I think the normal guy or gal is going to see it and be like, I can relate to that. I can relate to hiking all day and not hearing a bugle.
And I think you do that. I think you do it very well. You know, as an observer in the background, I've always admired the way that you carry yourself and you help the industry, and you're always just willing to teach people, right? And there's a quote by Abraham Lincoln that when they would ask, how he delivered some of his speeches, he said, "My goal is to always educate, not impress," right? And I think the moment you get those reverse, you just people know and you flounder. I guarantee you don't remember this, or you probably even know about it, but when I first moved out here, which has been a while now, didn't start elk hunting. I met my in-laws and my father-in-law is a logger in Eastern Oregon, sort of introduced me to it, probably now to my wife's dismay, a number of years ago. But I had no clue where to turn because he lived in Oregon. I lived here. I didn't know anything about it or really anyone who hunted. So I emailed you, and you had given me you responded, which I was, like, shocked by, but you'd given me some organizations to kind of reach out to and how to get involved, and, with the idea of by getting involved, you'll probably meet other elk hunters, and if you're genuine, people who have experience in it will sense that and probably start to teach you some things. But, I remember that email, and it meant a lot to me because I was getting no responses from anywhere else. You had nothing to gain or didn't know me from Adam, and you sent me that, but that was years ago, and I
Yeah,
always
I
appreciate
do.
that.
I do actually remember the email.
Okay.
And so the hard part for me is I grew up in that era where it's everything is secretive. You don't tell anybody where you hunt, and I still don't tell anybody where I hunt. We try to maintain as much secrecy as we can on that. But I realized that somebody else being successful doesn't impact my success. It's not taking away from my success. Like, yeah, I mean, if somebody's at the same trailhead as you and they shoot the bull that you're hunting, which has happened, you might not be successful because of that. But overall, somebody else being successful isn't going to take away from my success. I'm going to go out and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to create my success. But what I found was it actually amplifies my success to be able to be a small part of sharing, even if it's just in motivating or inspiring somebody to go. And they're like, hey, I'd never elk hunted before. I watched one of your videos and it got me excited about elk hunting. I went out and I killed my first elk. I get to share in that a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's rewarding. But beyond that, and Will Primo said it, and I hadn't connected the dots with it until he said it. But he said, I was talking to him at his house when we were doing the linguist film, and he said, if you teach someone to love something, they're going to protect it. And I
Yeah.
thought that's what I've been striving for all these years. Sure, there's my children. I want to protect the legacy of hunting so that they have something to hunt, so that they can be passionate about elk and elk hunting in public land like I am, but on a bigger scale. And we just saw it with the whole public land debacle. It took an army. I mean, it took
Yeah.
people passionate about something. There are a lot of people that love public land and they were willing to stand up and protect it. And the same goes for elk hunting. I don't ever want to see a day where elk hunting is taken away from us. And it can be. People think, oh, it's a privilege. Nobody can take that away from me. It's not. I mean, they think it's a right. It's a privilege. And it's something that we have to earn day after day. And the more people that are passionate about it, the more people we have on our side to protect that. And yeah, it comes at a cost. There's going to be more cars at a trailhead probably. And that's a cost that we just have to each evaluate. Is it worth it to be able to protect it in the long term? And it's something that, I get hate every day. Cory's ruining elk hunting. He's teaching people how to do it. And we haven't seen success rates change for years and years. And the reason why is success rates are probably almost exactly in line with people's rate of energy that they put into being successful.
Yeah.
And we don't change that. People have that drive. They have the desire to be successful. We can give them the tools to maybe speed up that curve a little bit. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be 90% of the people out there that just aren't willing to put in the work that it takes to be successful.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, even with us, like I'll tell people I can give you strategy after strategy, idea after idea. The one thing I can't do is make you do it. Right? I mean, I cannot force upon you the will and the desire to change one area of your life. And I think that that is such great perspective. And I think we are all starting to get a sense of this really could go away. And I agree 100% that the banding of everyone in any outdoor space has was what shot that bill down. I took my son on his first backpack trip last week, and we were basically by ourselves at this remote lake. And with him there, and as many trips as I've been on, looking at all of this, just thought I could not imagine what our lives, because it's such a big part of our lives, would be and look like if we couldn't do this, or if you had some massive price tag to do this in, or whatever. And so, yeah, I think it's great. Two off the cuff questions, and then I'm gonna let you go. As much time as you spent in elk woods, hunting elk, being with people who've hunted elk, what stands out as your most memorable experience?
Ooh, it's with my kids. Those are I don't know. There's just something, and I'm as selfish as anyone. I'm the guy. I want to be out in front. I want to be shooting the elk, and I I got married a little bit later. I think I was 25, 26. So, I'd kind of got set in my ways. I'd kind of got used to every weekend is my weekend. I can go shed hunting. I can go and do this. I can just, don't have responsibilities. And then you get married and you realize, okay, I've got to make a few changes here. And so you do. And then you have kids and that changes things. And it was a struggle. I think most parents probably experience it to some level, but it's like, do I go through the headache and the challenge of getting a 3-year-old ready and taking him antelope hunting with me? Or do I just go by myself and know that I can be successful? And if he goes, I'm probably not going to be. And that was a struggle. And when they finally get old enough to be able to hunt, now they're encroaching on your time in the field, and if I get 2 weeks in September and I have 3 kids that are old enough to hunt, you know, my time for me gets limited. And so I went through that. And I'll tell you right now, my kids are 22, 20, and 18. And I would not trade a second that I sacrificed to have the relationship we have and to see the things that I've got to see and the experience that I've got to have. I don't even know. 20 elk between the three of them that I've been standing over their shoulder as they drew back and shot an elk. And I would give up hunting tomorrow if I had to choose between myself having a tag and them having a tag. So those experiences, I think Isaac, my oldest, shot a bull when he was 12, maybe 13 on the Linguist film. They just wanted to capture father-son bonding out in the outdoors. And it just happened that, we're running a super expensive camera over his shoulder at 13 years old and a bull comes in and he shoots it. I was back 60 yards calling, so I didn't even get to see it. So to have that on film, to be able to watch him go through all of these things naturally and to execute the shot and to see his reaction, that's a top moment. my daughter shooting a bull with her bow. It's just her and I asked her if she wanted a camera, and she's like, I just want it to be you and me. And so I set her up. A bull comes in, she shoots it at 18 yards. And, we didn't film it, but I've got it. And she even said, I'm like, man, it would have been so cool to have a camera over your shoulders, bull broadside at 18 yards. She's like, Dad, I'll never forget that. Even if I don't have a video, I will remember that, every detail of it, for the rest of my life. And then, my youngest son, seeing him struggle last season, missed two bulls, and to see the frustration. And I mean, he wanted to throw the bow away. He wanted to quit bow hunting, and stuck with it. And with less than 24 hours left in elk season, it comes together and he shoots one. And just to all of those experiences, to see them not only be passionate about something that I'm passionate about, but to watch them have success in that those are the greatest moments for me.
Yeah, we've got a 3 and a 6-year-old, so I've not experienced the latter parts of that. I'm more in the 3-year-old, getting the 3-year-old ready for antelope hunting side of it. And you're right, I do find myself having to be very conscious about the investment in them as opposed to being selfish, and that is hard.
It is.
It is hard, but
There's nothing more rewarding, though. As
yeah.
me looking back, I did it. And I'm sure my kids will probably be like, yeah, you chose to go hunting with Donnie and left us at home, or you didn't take I'm sure that there are some of those times as well, but I made a conscious effort to take them and involve them, hoping, not knowing, but hoping it would pay off. And I can tell you right now, they're my best hunting partners. And there's no one that I would rather spend time in the field with.
All right. Speaking of, and this is the final question, time in the field. What is your best John Abernathy story?
Oh boy. I don't know if John he is so even killed. I mean, he's a spaz sometimes, but there are times that I'm pretty intense, and I probably say, or without saying anything, do things that would frustrate a lot of people. And it's just, and we've had that conversation, that I'm so intense and I'm so driven to be successful that there's some cost involved. And so I make sure Donnie and John know at the beginning of each hunt, hey, if I turn around and glare at you, just know it's because I want our team to be successful. It's not because, it's a personal thing. It's, you stepped on a stick you shouldn't have. And it's in the past, but I'm probably going to stop and acknowledge it. So John is just really good at putting up with me being intense, and he brings that. Camera guys kind of get thrown under the bus a lot, but John has captured some things and just is a natural at what he does, in a way that makes us, and when I say us, me and Donnie personally, but also Elk 101, he's able to bring things back and share them in a way that we wouldn't be able to do without him.
Yeah, such a good guy. I really, really like John a lot. But Cory,
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your time and you scheduling this. And I know this is prime time, busy season of the year for you, but you're one of the greatest ambassadors to hunting and just outdoors as a whole. And so thank you for taking the time to do this, and just really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I apologize. You were persistent, and I appreciate that persistence. But when I found out you wanted to talk about last season, I thought, I really don't want to relive 8 days of
Yeah.
hunting without food. But no, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Have a good season, Cory.
You too.
I want to say thanks to Cory for coming on and chatting with me. This was like in the thick of his season, and he very graciously arranged a few things so we could sit down and chat about it. And so I really appreciated that. If you want to get a hold of him or you have questions about anything that he talked about, his contact information, the Elk 101 information, again, is in the show notes. So you can just click that, dive in, and look at it or reach out to them. Thank you for listening. And as always, if you've got questions, topics, guests, etc., that you would like to hear on here, you can always send those over to us, and we would be more than happy to look into those or cover them. Our email address is info@v2pnutrition.com. As a reminder, there is an abundance of resources that are hopefully always applicable to what you may have going on, but probably even more so now given the time of year that it is. Dehydrate guide, as well as our backcountry nutrition planner. There's a backcountry nutrition course that's available if you want to check that out. There's a ton of free resources under the different links on our website. So, our goal has always been to put out really trustworthy, really great, really easy to digest nutrition information across a broad array of options for people that might be interested in accessing it. And again, you can find all of that stuff on our website. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another episode. Have a great week, everybody.